this is Beersborn. Welcome back to Game Design. In today's video, we're going to start a new game project. So I'm here in Construct 3, and I want to click on the New button up on top. Now this opens up the new project window. We're going to name it, we can just call this Game 2. This is our second game project. We can just call it Game 2. We can change the name later if we want to. Under presets, we should do 1080p landscape. That'll set the size and the resolution to what we want it to be for our computer monitor. And I also recommend checking the Optimize for Pixel Art option down here at the bottom. We're going to make pixel art sprites for this. So if it's optimized for pixel art, it'll just make those look better. And then click Create. And just like in our last game project, we have the Properties window over here on the left. We have our workspace in the center. You can zoom in and out using the Control key and the mouse wheel on your mouse. You can move around the space holding the space bar. On the right side, we have a projects window. This is where all of our different objects will be, and a layer window in the bottom right. We'll talk about layers a little bit later. Now, this project, we're going to learn some new concepts of game design, but to start with, we're going to do stuff that's a lot like our last game project. I want to add a couple objects into the game to start with. I'm going to add a main character sprite, and I'm going to add some kind of control input so our player can move our character around the space. So if we want to insert a new object, we're going to right-click anywhere in the white space of our layout. Click on Insert New Object, and I'm going to click one time, just a single click on Sprite. The reason why I'm clicking on it one time is because that way we can name it before we create it. I'm going to call this Character. This is going to be our main character, so I'm just going to call it Character. The name doesn't matter. You just want to make sure it's something that you'll recognize. If you call everything Sprite, then it becomes really confusing later when you want to find which object you're trying to work with. So name stuff that you'll recognize. Character. Click Insert. And let's click anywhere in the top left area. This is the border of our screen. This is the part of the level we can see. So I'm going to click anywhere up here, and it opens up the animations editor. Now for this, we're just going to make a placeholder sprite for now. Later, we'll make a better sprite. But just so we can get the mechanics of the game down first, I'm going to draw just a triangle. And I want the triangle to be pointing towards the right. And the reason for that is because we're going to make sure that we can tell which direction our sprite's facing here. So we want to have like a front. And this point over here on the right side will be the front of our sprite. Now by default, Construct believes that the sprite is facing towards the right. So usually when we're drawing characters, we'll draw them facing to the right. And that way, it just works a little bit better when we put it in and start rotating it based on which direction we're facing. So I made a triangle. Once you've got the triangle finished, you can just close the animations editor window. And there's our character sprite, just a simple triangle. Now, if you want to change the size of it, you can do it. You can grab the corner of it, change the size. If you hold down the Shift key on your keyboard, it keeps it proportional. That way you don't stretch it out. And you want to make sure it's up here in this top left corner, because this is the part of the stage that we can see by default. If it's over here, you're not going to be able to see it. If you ever want to change the name of an object, you can do it over here in the top left window. You'll see where it says name up here. So mine is character, but you can change it up there if you want to. Now the second thing I'm going to put in, another object. I'm going to go down to the input section, and we have all the options for different ways of controlling our game. For this, we're going to use the keyboard. So I'm going to add keyboard input. Now, if you look over here on the right side, under our project, we have object types, we have a character, we have our keyboard. Perfect. Now let's head over to the event sheet. All of this is in the layout tab, and that's where we see all of our sprites. But over in the event sheet, that's where we make the events that actually control the game. So I'm going to click to add a new event up in the top left. Now with events have two parts to them. The first part is the condition. That's the trigger that's going to make something happen. So I want to think about, okay, I'm going to try to make the character move. I want to press keys on my keyboard to make my character move around the screen. So the condition is going to be when my player presses a key on the keyboard. So I'm going to add a condition that uses the keyboard. Now here we have different options. Key codes, let's not worry about those. We're never really going to use key codes here. They're not really necessary for what we do. We want to use this keyboard section. And this has some useful things like on any key pressed or when you release a key. But for us, we're going to use key is down. What key is down means is that the whole time the player is pressing down a key, we can make something happen. as compared to on key pressed, which means when the player presses a key, that action will just happen a single time rather than repeating. So we want to have this character move the entire time somebody's holding the key down. It's going to say, okay, which key are we going to use? Now, we're going to make our player press a button to move the character to the right first. So we want to think about what button are we going to use to move our character to the right. Our options are maybe the right arrow key, so I can press the right arrow on my keyboard, or you can press the D key. We can use A, S, W, and D on the keyboard. Those are like normal, just kind of standards for directional keys. So D or the right arrow, whatever you prefer. I'm going to do D. Click OK, click Done. And there's the first condition for our action. When the keyboard D key is being pressed down. Now we can add an action here. We're actually going to do this a couple different ways. I'm going to show you one way to do it that's pretty easy and simple, and then we're going to go back and change it to a way that's a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more flexible. But for now, let's just do it this way. The action is it's what's going to happen when our player presses down the D key. So I want to have my character, and I want to find an option for moving my character at a certain angle across the screen. So I can look through this long list of different options I can have happen to this object. But if I scroll down towards the bottom, there's a whole section for size and position. Position's useful. You'll see that there's an option for move at angle. I can make my object change its position and move at a specific angle across the screen. Now, when you double click on that, it has an option for angle and an option for distance. The angle is a number between 0 and 360. And for most game engines, 0 is to the right, 90 is down, 180 is to the left, and 270 is up. So depending on what number you put in here, it's going to move your character at that specific direction. 0 is to the right. That's just kind of the default direction, which is why we drew our triangle facing to the right. Everything by default just goes right. So we're going to keep the angle at 0. That'll move it to the right. The distance is how fast it's going to go. 1 is kind of slow. Let's try 10. We can always change it later. Let's say a distance of 10 pixels for every tick that our player is holding down the D key. Now let's try it out. Hit the play button. Here's our demo. Hit the D key. And our character moves to the right. Now you can't move it any other direction, but it does move to the right. Let's do the same thing to make it move to the left. I have to add a new event for this. So I'm going to click on Add Event. And just like with the last event, I'm going to go to my keyboard. The condition is going to be when the key is down. And this time we're going to move to the left. So I'm going to use either the left arrow or maybe the A key. And click Done. So when the A key is down, I'm going to add an action, take my character, and I'm going to move at angle. And this time, the left is 180. 0 is to the right, 180 is to the left, 180. And the distance, we want to keep that the same. I'm going to go 10 pixels. So 0 to the right when they're pressing down D. A is 180 to the left. Let's try that out. It works. We can do the same thing for up and down. So let's add those in. I'm going to do it pretty quick. Key is down. Click to choose. I'm going to do the W key for up. You could do the up arrow or any other key if you prefer. Add action. Go to my character. Move at angle. Up is the number 270. And the distance is, again, 10. And let's make it go down too. Add event. Keyboard. Key is down. I'm going to do S to move my character down. You could also do the down arrow or a different key. For the action, it's going to be my character moving at angle. Down is 90. And the distance is 10. Perfect. Now if I hit play, I can move my character in any direction. Try it out. Now, one thing I'm noticing is I have this black box around the edge of my demo here. That is kind of annoying, right? It doesn't look very good. Let me show you how to turn that off. And this is something that isn't critical, but it's going to make our preview look better. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to our layout really quick and just click anywhere in the gray area. That way you don't have your object selected. Like it's just, nothing is selected. And then over here in the properties window, down under project properties, you want to click the view button. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down a little bit and find this part right here that says full screen mode. By default, it sets it to letterbox integer scale. We're going to change that to scale outer. And all that does, letterbox is just the black border around it. We just want to turn the letterbox off. So if we just do scale outer, that way when we press play, it won't have that weird black border. Not really critical, but I think it makes the demo look better. All right, cool. So that's a very easy way to allow our player to move a character around the screen, right? Just 4 events, 4 different keys moving at different angles. Let me show you a different way to do this though, and it's a better way in some ways. We're going to use something called a behavior. We haven't really talked about behaviors yet, but what behaviors are, they are kind of like a set of abilities we can give to an object that give us more options. And down the road, it's going to open some more doors for us so we can have more dynamic types of movement and collision detection and all kinds of cool stuff later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my layout and I want to click on my object. And then if I look over here on the left side, you'll see an option for behaviors, and it's in blue there. Add, edit, click behaviors. We can add a new behavior. If you click add new, this menu pops up, and these are all these different options for things we can give to that object. Like say we want an object to fade, we can click the fade, or say we want it to flash, or pin it to another object, or have a timer connected to it, all these different things. But we want to go down to the bottom, and what we're going to do is we're going to give it a type of movement behavior. There's different types. We want to use the 8 direction. What 8 direction means is if you want something to be able to move up, down, left, and right, and diagonally in between those, 8 direction is the best way to do it. So if I double click on 8 direction, what that does is it gives me options over here in my behaviors window. So on the properties, you'll see 8 direction, max speed 200, acceleration, deceleration, different directions, set angle. We'll talk about what all these things mean in just a minute. But in order to make this work, I have to go back to my event sheet, and I'm going to change these events a little bit. Instead of having the action say that my character moves 10 pixels at angle 0, let's change that. You can always change an action by double-clicking on it. So double-click on that text. And it's going to say, do you want to change, the parameters of the move at angle? We're going to go back. We want to go back a step. And instead of using move at angle, we want to go through this list, and you should see a whole new section for 8 direction. When you give a behavior to an object, it gives you more options in our event sheet. So now under the 8 direction section, we have all these different things like reverse or accelerate or decelerate or, set vector X and all these fancy things. We're just going to use simulate control for now. What simulate control is like, it's just basically telling the object which direction to move. It's a little bit simpler because we don't have to worry about those numbers like 90, 80, 270, whatever. You can just say like, okay, when the D key is down, I want to move to the right. Click done, and there we have it. We're going to do the same thing for left. I'm going to change my action. Double click on it, hit the back button, go to my 8 direction section, simulate control, and I want to move A is left. For W, I'm going to double click on the action, hit back once, go to my 8 direction, simulate control, moving up. And for S, double click, hit back, simulate control, move it down. Now you might be wondering, why didn't we just do this in the first place? I think it's helpful to understand that you can make anything just with the actions that we have available to us in the beginning. But giving a behavior to something oftentimes makes that easier, and it does open the doors for stuff that we're going to do later. So the behavior is, I think, the better way to do this. And now if I hit play, I'll see that it still moves, but now I have some other things going on with it when I move it. For one, it automatically flips to face the direction I want to move. 2, it's a lot slower. And 3, it might feel a little floaty. And what I mean by that is that when I let go of my movement direction, it kind of skids, it slides a little bit. And it takes a little bit of time for my character to move like at full speed when I press the button. All of these things are settings that we can adjust. If I close the demo and look over here, the layout, make sure my character is selected. On the properties, all of these options will change the way that behavior feels, the way the movement handles. So for one, the max speed set to 200, that feels a little slow to me. So I'm going to turn the max speed up. Maybe I'll do 500 instead. And I'll test it out. I'll hit play. That feels a little faster. Still feels a little weird because it takes so long for the character to move and to stop. Typically, we want to make sure that the movement for our character feels very responsive, very snappy. It's good design principles to have it so when the player presses the direction button, they start moving instantly. And when they let go of the movement button, it stops instantly. That feels more fair to the player. It feels like they have total control over the movement. There might be exceptions to that. If you have a level that's like, I don't know, an ice world or something, and you want it to be slippery, you can change that. Or if it's like a driving game and you want the car to kind of drift, then that might be a different case. But for most of the time, you want the action to be very, very responsive. So to do that, I'm going to turn the acceleration up to a really high number. I don't want to take a long time to accelerate. So I'm going to do just like 99,999. I just typed in like 5 nines. And that way the acceleration is turned up to the max, basically. So if I hit play and try it now, as soon as I press that button, it's going to instantly start moving that direction. I don't have to like accelerate up to my max speed. Now notice how much it drifts after I let go of my button. That's the deceleration. If I turn that up, again, 99999, you don't want to go too many nines. If you do like 100 nines, it's going to maybe crash your game. So I would just do like, I don't know, maybe 5 nines or so. Now the movement's very snappy, very responsive. Cool, feels much better. Now one thing that's kind of cool here is now our triangle is rotating to face whatever direction we're moving, right? That's very handy. What that is, that's the set angle here. That set angle is set to smooth. You can turn it off if you want. If you go to no, then it won't rotate to face your direction. Eventually, we're going to change that probably when we add our sprite in. But for now, we can just keep it at smooth. I think that'll look pretty good and faces the right direction. Now, if yours is not facing the right direction, that might be because you didn't draw your triangle facing to the right. Other options, you can set which direction it moves. Sliding will allow it to like kind of move across a barrier, which won't really come into play until later. Default controls are the arrow keys. If you want to make it so the player uses the arrow keys to control your character, then you can check that box. If you want to make it so it's not the arrow keys by default, you can uncheck that box. Because we have this stuff in the event sheet, we don't really need the default controls. We're using these instead, which might be the arrow keys, but I'm using ASWD instead. So I can uncheck that box. And enable just means like, is this behavior working? We want to keep that one checked, otherwise it won't move. Great. So we have movement of our character. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add something for our character to do. What we're going to do with this game is we're going to create another object that's going to be like food, basically. And if our character takes that food, if it touches it, then it'll consume the food and get bigger. Every time it'll eat a food, it'll grow in size. So we're going to add a new object into our game. I'm going to go to the layout. I'm going to insert a new object. It's going to be a sprite. I'm just going to click on it once. I'm going to call it food. Now click anywhere. And we're going to keep it just a very simple sprite. I'm just going to make a little circle. I'm going to change the color. I'm going to make it green. And this little circle is going to be my food. Now that's kind of a big circle, so I'm going to scale it down a little bit. I don't want the food to be bigger than my character is. So I'm just going to make it a small dot here. And again, we'll replace this sprite. This is just a placeholder. We'll make a good looking sprite for it later. Now what I want to do is over my event sheet, I'm going to create some kind of event that says when my player touches the food object, then number one, the food object should disappear, right? It should be consumed by my player. So I'm going to add an event. It's going to say, what's the condition? What's the thing that has to happen? I want my character to touch the food, right? So I'm going to go to my character. And if you scroll down a little bit, you should see a collision section and highlight it in yellow because it gets used so much. It says on collision with another object. So I'm going to say, okay, when my character on collision with the food, then I can make an action happen. My character on collision with food, the action is, for one, the food should disappear. It should be destroyed, right? There are things to like set it invisible, but we don't want the food to just turn invisible. We want the food to like disappear completely, to be destroyed from the game like we've eaten it. So there is an option for destroy down here, about halfway, maybe a little past halfway under the miscellaneous section, destroy. Now, when I hit play, I have the food sitting there, and if I go up and touch it, I eat it. Now, one thing I want to point out about this, you might notice this too, it disappears before you get to it. See how like I'm not even all the way there yet before it disappears? Let's talk about that. If you go over to the layout and you double click on your, let's say our character first, double click on it. Down here on the bottom of the toolbar, you'll see a tool that's a triangle with little dots on it. This is something called the collision polygon. Construct and any game engine doesn't really know where the body of your objects are until you tell it. So we have to decide where's the actual physical body of my character. By default, it just makes this big square that goes around the whole thing. What that means is anytime something gets this close to it, Construct thinks I'm touching it. So what I want to do is I want to make this a little bit smaller to fit the sprite better. Now you can just click and drag to move these dots around. You can also delete dots if you right click on them. You can delete one. You can add more points if you need to. For us, since it's a triangle, we can delete one of the 4 and just have a 3-dot triangle polygon. It doesn't have to fit exactly. In fact, most game designers will make it a little bit smaller than the sprite just because it feels more fair to the player typically. We'll talk about that more in the future too. But just make it fit roughly your sprite. We're going to do the same thing to the circle, the food. If I double click the collision polygon, it's this whole big area. So I'm going to make it a much smaller collision polygon. Now you can add some points in there if you want to make it fit the circle a little bit better. It doesn't have to be exact. And the more dots you have on your collision polygon, the more like memory intensive your game becomes. So you don't want to add too many points when you can avoid it. You know, if you can kind of minimize how many points you have, that usually makes your game run smoother. That should be good. Let's close it. We can't see any change here, but if I play it, now I don't actually eat the food until I'm touching it, right? It doesn't disappear before I actually make contact. Now let's save this. I'm going to go up to the save button that's up on the top menu. Click on save, and let's save it into wherever we've been saving project files for this class. You want to name it, again, you can just call it Game 2 for now, unless you want to name it something different. Whatever you'll remember, Game 2 is easy. And then click the save button. And we'll leave it there for today. We'll pick this up in the next video. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.